from Thundershot Studios. Really glad you could join us for the VPA Ask the Entertainment Lawyer program. But first, I need to mention a little bit about the organization that's hosting this special event. The Virginia Production Alliance, or as we call it, the VPA, has provided opportunities for Virginia's film and television community for more than 30 years. The VPA sponsors professional development and networking events, just like this one, and supports people who are building professional film-related careers and businesses. The VPA is also the leading advocate for Virginia's production community, interacting with state lawmakers to help pass legislation that incentivizes film and television work in our state. The VPA also has a listserv with thousands of your fellow professionals. Signing up to see what's on the listserv is absolutely free, but you have to be a member to interact with others. So if you enjoy the program tonight, check out virginiaproductionalliance.org and think about becoming a member. You'll be supporting programs like this one and a whole lot more. We're very lucky to have Kirk T. Kirk T. I don't want to grow that. I've heard that one before. Sorry, Kirk T. Schroder with us this evening. He's an experienced entertainment and, we have so many. We have to pull out our amateur. We have so many proper actors in the VPA, and none of them are here to. No, one is. Okay. I may get her to tell people what the VPA is. Kirk is one of the most amazing entertainment lawyers in our industry. We're very happy to have him here this evening. I think I'm going to let you handle the introduction.
I see the teleprompter is
exactly.
Pretty fast.
Exactly.
Okay.
I appreciate it. And are we unmuted for you?
I don't know. Am I there?
Yes.
All right. So now all my comments
now
are scratched. The prior comments.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Lawrence, thank you first off, and let me thank the Virginia Production Alliance for having me here today. This is one of my favorite events, being up here at the Thundershot Studios. And just by way of brief introduction, since we had a little teleprompter issues there, I'm Kirk Schroder. I'm an entertainment attorney at the law firm of Schroder Brooks, and we're based throughout Virginia. My primary areas of practice are in film and television, but I also have a rather booming literary practice, but I would say those are my three bread and butter areas. I've been practicing this area for well too long, but I will say that some people would say it's over 20 years. Could be more, could be slightly less. It's actually a little bit more. Along the way, I've taught entertainment law at the University of Virginia Law School, University of Richmond. I've lectured at Harvard Law School, at the American University, among others places. I'm co-editor of the Essential Guide to Entertainment Law, and was a former chair of the American Bar Association Entertainment Law section. Live and breathe these issues day in and day out. And I'm excited because I have another lawyer in the audience. Just by he just came to support me. Joe Meadows is in Old Town Alexandria. He's a libel, slander, defamation online attorney. We just did a podcast for the DC bar on how to defend your online reputation. So now I feel very empowered because you can just ask me about anything. And if I don't know, I can just look over at Joe and just ask if, Joe, what firm are you with?
Gordon Reese.
Gordon Reese and DC Alexander. And Joe lectures quite a bit in libel and slander and defamation type issues. And we've just become friends over quite a bit of time. So I'm grateful for you here, and I may actually call on you if I'm not sure about something. So I don't know what our rules are, but this is Ask an Entertainment Lawyer night. So if you have questions about any legal issues that you want to ask in the entertainment field, I'm not gonna be able to help you on wills and estates or trust accounts or banking or real estate issues or things of that sort. Maybe some, but really, if you have questions about the entertainment business, any particular area. I also am familiar with gaming issues and a variety of different things that may relate to our audience, certainly intellectual property issues. I'm here to answer those questions. And then I'm not sure this is the first time because of the pandemic that we've done this format with the Zoom audience, but I want to thank our Zoom audience for coming out and tuning in today. I don't know where everybody is from. I tried to take a quick look at the list and see some familiar friends. So thank you for coming. And if there are any Zoom audience questions, Lars, I'm going to let you help direct that. Let me just start off by saying that in the last 6 months, so much has been happening in the film and television industry. I mean, things that are changing the dynamics quite a bit, to the point that in the last few weeks, as I've done distribution deals and things like that, I have been more, well, I have been, how can I say this, not worried, but more anxious than usual about what 5 years will look like in a deal, because you don't know what technology will be around. You don't know what will be monetized. And the nervousness comes when you're giving away something and you're not sure if you're going to get monetized that money 5 years from now. You don't want a client calling you up and saying, Kirk, why did you put me into the situation? The music industry has had that in the old days in the record industry. When you gave away rights to your music, it was for phonograph records, because no one ever imagined that there would be anything beyond the phonograph. That, you know, now they're back, I guess. But then the CD came out, and when you started looking at the language in a lot of these contracts, it was simply the rights to the phonograph. It wasn't a broad spectrum of mediums and platforms that we know of today as a result of rapid technology. And all of a sudden, there were many artists who had record deals that owned the CD rights to their records, despite the fact that the record company had, you know, long-standing contractual rights. So it created a bit of a mess, and certainly there were lawyers that were, you know, getting in trouble, or, you know, were in the midst of things that they just could not foresee. These days now, you know, whenever there is a deal on monetizing things, you have to always think about, what does this look like? And what will be the monetization of that a few years from now? So like, if you're just looking at a deal and you're going, oh, okay, this is how much money I'm going to make off of a box office, off of streaming or something like that, that may not be the revenue source for your project, or the primary revenue source years from now. In the book industry, gosh, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, everyone was predicting in the book industry that 80% of all the books we're going to read are going to be electronic. And so whenever I was involved in a book deal, I would, you know, be very worried about the percentage and the payout on the electronic book, because I'd tell the client, you know, 5, 6, 8 years from now, that's going to be the important figure. And that's what we would focus on. Well, you know, 5, 6, 8, 9 years have passed. And you know what? Electronic books are not controlling the literary agency. In fact, I spoke at a webinar earlier today that was recorded with a major New York literary agent, and we were both talking in this webinar about these predictions about the book industry. And more than ever, the book industry is thriving. People want the physical paperback or hard book, and all these predictions that were there 7 or 8 years ago just really didn't come about. The electronic book is one deal point in a book contract, but it's not what everyone thought it was going to be because of technology. But you never know. And that my job as the attorney is to deal with the you never know situation. Usually nowadays, if I'm negotiating with a distributor, I'm usually able to get a provision that says that if there's a new technology out there, that while you, distributor, may have the rights to that technology or that platform to exhibit our content on that platform, those rights are frozen until we negotiate a deal. And when and if we negotiate a deal, that deal has to at least be no less favorable than the last deal you did in that. And if we're the first up to negotiate that deal, then we will be upgraded, if you will, to any future deals that are comparably better than what we have. So those are things that we think of. So that's one change that is more rapid than ever before. The second thing that is quite significant, I don't know if any of y'all have ever heard of the old studio system, and that phrase for the entertainment business. That was in the time when, in the 1940s, but in particular the 1950s, the studios, that is the major studios, Warner Brothers, Paramount, Universal, all not only owned the studios, but they owned all the aspects of distribution, in particular the theaters. So they called it the old studio system because literally they could make anyone a star. Because if you're making the film and then you're controlling who gets to seat in the theater, you have a monopoly on everything. And so hence the old studio system was what it was called in those days. Well, the U.S. Justice Department came about in the 1950s in a case called U.S. v. Paramount and broke up the old studio system. And as part of that, the decree which came out of the Southern District of New York basically said, you, Hollywood studio, cannot own the theaters. The theaters must be owned independently. And a lot of unfair business practices where the studios would say to the theater, you can have this film, which is very popular, if you take these other two films that might be, for one reason or another, less desirable. So a lot of these tactics were addressed in antitrust litigation. And as a result, you saw different phases of how movies were made. You had the rise of very star-studded, films that then went into books that were being retold or sequels. So I don't know how many Rockies we're at. I think we're at on Fast and Furious. We're at 9. I just saw, I think we're at number 9 on Fast and Furious. So that's very important. And because why? Because the entry level to make a film was still significant enough and the risk involved. Let's say like we're in the holiday season right now, and before the pandemic and before Netflix, and as a general proposition, you might have anywhere from 20 to 30 films released in the classic box office world in the traditional holiday system, holiday season. But of those, 20 to 30, 5 might be profitable. Okay, that's a pretty stark statistic. However, those 5 or 6 or 7 would be so profitable that they would cover the cost of all 30 films that might be out there. That's how the economics were. So the monopoly existed because the studios already existing had the financial ability to take that kind of risk. But when the studio system started to become more dismantled and the cost of entry to get into a film, 20 years ago, the amount of money it took to make a good film is not the same today because of just look at all the technology. Even to be in a studio like this where films are made and a lot of audiovisual content, the cost of equipment and the cost of what it would take to be in here 20 or 30 years ago, not anything near in more recent time. So you had this phenomenon where technology was making the entry level into filmmaking easier and cost effective, while at the same time you still had the risk in the business. And so studios and others kept these strategies on how to mitigate that risk in order to be profitable. Everything from locking in stars. Then we had the advent of the independent films. Miramax was the classic one, owned by Disney, I guess, still. You had Samuel Goldwyn, a lot of these that found niches within this market based on quality rather than, hook, line, and sinker types of action films or things that would normally go about. And now technology has taken us into another level, and that was the streaming services, and which has further disrupted things, because now with the streaming services, at first they were just distributors, and you had the first one being Netflix, and they were just simply trying to license content from the studios and anyone else that would take that. Then eventually Netflix, and now Amazon, and all the majors, NBC has Peacock, Disney Plus, are all out there. They started becoming their own studios. And so now you have, you don't have just the regular studios, you have Disney Plus, you have Amazon, Hulu. I can just go on down the list of the market share. So now you have traditional studios in the lots on Lancashire Avenue in LA, and in Culver City with Sony, and in other places, competing with new platforms that don't have all this overhead lot, yet now have the reach because of the technology. And so that has been a shakeout in how films and everything are distributed. And when Netflix first started out, as well as the others, they did something in order to shake the market when they became the studio that the traditional studios did not do. And that is, they would not make deals based on performance. So in the classic, for many years, I represented Universal Pictures and productions, and have a number of Universal productions under my belt in various different capacities. Well, it was very easy to see how a film did by just looking at the box office information, right? And you had different windows of how these films would do financially, and that had a tie-in into what you could expect from a financial standpoint and other things. Netflix said, no, we're not going to do that. In fact, we don't care how good the content is. We're not going to tell you how your content does on our platform. And I remember maybe, I guess, 2.5 years ago, I was talking to the president of Broadway Video in New York, and Broadway Video in New York owns all the rights, or controls all the rights, to a lot of NBC late night. So you've got Fallon, Seth Meyers, Saturday Night Live, a lot of good content. And I remember him saying, look, I can't even get that information out of Netflix on my content. So you can get a feel. So that started shaking up how distribution deals were addressed in streaming platforms. And then you found that this idea that you could see whatever you want on demand when you want to see it, as opposed to going into the traditional theater, had another impact, and that was, it was killing the traditional windows of how films were monetized. The traditional windows being that you first saw it in the theater, then it came out on TV, then it may have come out on cable or something like that, and then somewhere it ended up overseas, and then somewhere it ended up on an airplane, and then in some cassette or video, and you could own, and there were pretty good models, economic models, that you could build in how these films would do based on other comparables and things of that sort. So streaming and these platforms killed that model, and the traditional studios have been scrambling to try to figure out how do they move beyond what has been a traditional model and a monopoly that they've had for so many years. As a result, within the last 6 months, a few things of very importance that we'll see that will impact the film and TV world for quite some time to come. First, the Paramount decrees have gone away. So now film studios can own theaters. So it may very well be that one day when you go to that theater down the street, I'm staying here for a few days and I'm hoping to go see something over at Angelica, but it would not surprise me if one day, if you go over to Angelica over here, that all you will see are Sony pictures and nothing else. You may not have the variety of films, and you will have studios that may start buying up real estate. Now, what in order to put up their own theaters that just showcase their films. That has collided with the perfect storm of the pandemic, because what did the pandemic do to the theaters? Practically wiped them out. All of the major theaters stayed out of the, we back up, all of the major studios stayed out of the major theaters during the pandemic because people weren't going. And to the extent that people were going, what you would find were mid-level distributors like Gravitas and others that were no longer having to compete with big studios and had open space in order to put projects up that would not normally be there, but for the situation of the pandemic. It doesn't mean that that was profitable, but you had theater chains threatening and or going into bankruptcy. Cinemark right now is essentially going to be bought up by a studio. It remains to be seen whether others will end up that way. So there is a lot of realignment that is happening, and it will change again how these deals look like and how you monetize these your content, the productions that you take into a place and try to sell out into the market. The third and final thing, and that's just happened within the last few weeks, Netflix has further shaken up the field, because now Netflix has said, oh, we're now going to start listing our top 10 performers on Netflix as a study. So now all of a sudden Netflix is ready to give data out on what at least their top 10 looks like. Why? I imagine first it's just to get the feet in the water, but you can imagine eventually, even if you just knew the top 10 performings, you start having a feel for how Netflix calculates its productions and what it does. And I don't know, you're going to learn just everything, but as Netflix perhaps expands that list and says, here's a list of all of our performing films, productions that are on and how they're doing, then when you're negotiating with Netflix, you have that information and you have comparables and you have some sense. Why are they doing that? Well, likely now to shake up the competition with Amazon, with Disney Plus, with Peacock and others who are not doing any of that. So now they're shifting the playing field to go and perhaps make them a more desirable place to go for your projects. So it's a very interesting and exciting time. It's always a time when again, how these deals are done and how they're approached really take very careful thought, very careful analysis. The one thing I will say before I really open the floor up for questions, and I may take my jacket off here with some of these lights, is that at the end of the day, one of the hardest conversations I have with clients is when we're talking to a distributor and you don't just accept the deal, you don't just accept the percentage, right? A distributor may give you a percentage. Part of my job is to do due diligence with the distributor to understand what platforms, what are they doing, and usually I try to see if I can build a model as to, in an ideal scenario or home run scenario, to use the baseball term, what would be a likely model if the film did really well or the production did really well? What would be a moderate and what would be a low performing? Well, if that high performing number, which is usually out of the ballpark or something again that is above average in performance, is considerably less than the amount of money that you put in the film, then that's a problem, right? Everybody understands that. But that's not always easy for clients to accept that, because at the end of the day, there's the lure that someone wants the film, but you also have investors potentially, you have other factors that come into play with this. So even figuring out the economics and what makes sense, I would generally say to a client in good faith that if a film has the potential to make money back in an above average performance or scenario, that's an honest and fair risk given the industry and usually people that are involved in it. I do represent what I would classify as sophisticated investors in this area. And when I mean sophisticated, they know how to look all the way down to the T at a project. And it's not just any project they're going to take. They're going to, they look for factors that they believe in their algorithms and in their calculations will make a difference in whether or not they will see a return on investment. And if they think there's any risk, they will negotiate a deal that will, really mitigate any chance of problem of a risk of not seeing their money. That's a level of sophistication as far as the investors who work in this area. But with that said, it is an area that continues to thrive despite the economic risk, despite the changes in the marketplace, and many of the other different things that are going on. And I would say, just if anything, from my perspective, the pandemic did more for production and did more for getting content out, short of the risk of a union strike, which we had a few that were on the horizon, but were avoided. And unfortunately, now it looks like baseball is going to be. I'm glad I'm not a sports lawyer, but I think if the baseball strike goes and affects the season, then baseball is going to really take a hit from the last time. And I don't know if any of y'all remember the writer's strike, but that also had a toll on our industry, especially as television productions and others supported the writers, and there was a lot of shutdown going on and a lot of interesting adjustments in the marketplace. So those are just some opening general comments to what I see going on in the film and TV side of things. I'm going to ask who will be the first person to either raise their hand or have a question. Is it someone that's on a Zoom or here in our audience?
Yep.
It's on Zoom. Great.
Hi,
Where should I be looking? Right here. Hi.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I'm a 74-year-old playwright and screenwriter, and I'm on the verge of...
and what is your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, John Aaron, I guess it
Hey,
is.
John, nice to meet you.
And I'm in Cabin John, Maryland, and I'm on the board of WIF in DC.
Nice.
So I'm about to begin negotiating a collaboration agreement with a composer for a movie musical for which I've written the book and the lyrics. It's been some years.
Are we talking live stage or are we talking film or TV?
Hopefully film, possibly episodic TV. I wouldn't mind going for a trifecta and getting on all 3 platforms. But
Now,
for the moment,
so let me, if I can just interrupt you as good, so I'm clear. Are you writing with a composer? So you're just writing for theatrical right now?
no, it would be suitable for a feature, motion picture.
Mm-hmm.
It could be suitable as a basis for episodic TV.
Okay.
Think My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend without the psychotropic drugs, or potentially theatrical. But as a contractual matter, since it's been a few years since I've done this, in the past, I would have negotiated it either in my own name as an individual, in the name of my LLC, or potentially as the trustee of my living trust. Given the state of the industry today, how should I negotiate it? As an individual, LLC, or as my own trustee?
I think everyone understood the question. I need to repeat that, Lars, or we're good? We're good. Okay. Well, thank you for the question. Two things. If you're simply just selling the property and you're not going to provide services, I assume your LLC is a single member LLC?
Correct.
Okay. So from a tax standpoint, you're going to be treated as a Schedule C either way, whether you sell it personally or as an LLC. So then the issue becomes, do you want the protection of any liability that would come, and the liability would come from any infringement. I have behind me, as you know, a defamation attorney who could follow up on anything that I'm saying. But if there is something in your script that would have infringed on someone's rights, the LLC will protect your personal assets if, in fact, there is a legitimate claim. If you plan to be a writer on the series, and if you want to be an active writer, I still think the LLC is the way to go, and it would be in a form of a lending agreement where the LLC would be the lender of your personal services for that. If my experience is on the television side that if you have not written, are you WGA at all?
No.
Okay. So if you've not written before and you're negotiating an episodic deal, the showrunner and the production company are typically going to have the writers that they want. And part of your leverage in how you negotiate that deal will be not only selling the content of what you've developed, but trying to get you into the writer's room as a leverage point. And that'll be where the rubber hits the road in that negotiation. And in that scenario too, I would think that an LLC, just by nature of protecting your personal assets, would be the way to go. From a tax standpoint, it's not going to make any difference. You'll still be a Schedule C as a sole member. So unless the LLC is defunct, or you just don't have, it's just not, functioning in some way, you don't have a bank account for it, all things that you could easily fix. I would always just recommend the LLC as a loan out for your services and or the sale of any asset that you're which would be the content. And it would just be done in the name of your LLC. And if there were any contract disputes, any infringement disputes or anything like that, and they were successful, your LLC would be the veil that would protect any of your personal assets.
Got it. I understand. So if I understand you in a very quick summary, doing it through my LLC is no impediment to my personal sale of services on an ongoing basis.
No, because when the LLC makes the deal, the production company will require you personally to sign an inducement letter.
Okay, got it.
And then the inducement letter will be negotiated to really limit. We'll say that you will oblige and be available and you'll be the key person and all that stuff, but it will be negotiated to at least limit your liability.
Got it.
So you will, if you sign an inducement letter and then you go on strike, then you may have a personal liability. Okay.
Okay.
But if there is an infringement of some sort that is held by the LLC, we would maybe be able to negotiate some differences. I think it would be difficult as a practical matter, because if the chain of title was such that you were the sole writer, then they would just simply say to you that, well, you're the person who wrote this. How do you not know if it's infringing on someone's rights or if you took from it? But as a conceptual matter, LLC will be a loan out. You would sign an inducement letter for your personal services if, in fact, you end up providing personal services.
Great, thank you. That's very illuminating. I appreciate
Well,
it.
I'm a big fan of women in film and video in DC. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
How about anyone here, or who is that? Oh, okay, we got someone here. Hi.
Hi, Kirk.
I
My
love
name's-
those glasses.
Thank you. Wait, can I do the
Do you want to
Rizzo?
tell the audience who you are?
My name's Cameron Kitt.
Hi,
I'm
Cameron.
actually in Virginia Beach right now. I'm a filmmaker in Richmond, and I also go back and forth between Brooklyn. First of all, thank you for doing this, and what a cool studio with the moving crane
This
and
is,
everything.
I love being up here at Thundershot. Lawrence knows it. This is just the event that I
jealous.
look forward to every year. And this year is no different.
Yeah, for you guys who are in the audience, you don't get to see how cool the crane shots look. But also, I love that the BPA is providing this service because I'm saving some money right now. Kirk, this is kind of a general question. I really appreciate you giving us an idea of the studio system and how it's changing. Some stuff I really didn't know, but this question is a little bit more geared towards indie films. I've been on both sides. I've been director and producer, but what are some things that you
Have you
look
sold
for?
anything?
Oh no.
Okay, but do
But
you
I
have
wanna
stuff in the,
know-
do you have stuff in the can?
Oh yeah, I got a feature and I'm currently
short
working
films, features. What do you have?
5 short films, written feature, and I'm working on a feature-length documentary that's 3 years in.
So like, what's your vision and goal here?
Okay, I don't want to take too much time up.
No. These are things I need to know and how I answer your question.
My vision is to make a living
I'm
as a
just not a
director.
one-ant question. Here it is. Let's move on. I gotta understand things a little bit. So tell me,
Yeah.
what are your goals and what are you trying to do?
My life goal is to make a living as a director.
Okay.
I have
Oh,
experience.
you're not DGA, obviously, right?
No.
You want to get
So-
to DGA.
Yes, and
Okay,
I know I
got
have a lot of hours to put in, right? I think there are 350 hours or 350 consecutive days. So I'm a little bit of a ways away. So I've been working in the indie position. So I'm more on the indie side, right? Dealing with individuals who are producing or very small production companies. My question is, what do you look for in a director's agreement with a producer or a production company?
What do you look for in a director's agreement with a producer or a production company? So if I'm representing you, what sort of things I would be telling you to be aware of, right?
Yes.
So, first and foremost, and this is why I asked you earlier, it would be great if we could get you qualified for DGA, right?
Okay.
For the most part, the production company has to be a signatory to the DGA, and it's kind of a catch-22 because as a practical matter, someone has to go to a film festival or someone has to go somewhere and see your project and go, oh my gosh, I need her to direct our next film, and we would negotiate. I'll just give you an example. I have been representing a faith-based project right now, and the producers found a director represented by a good quality entertainment law firm in LA,
Okay.
and we're negotiating with for the director's services for this project. And she does have a lot of credits around her, and she's doing quite well. But the big sticking point was my client wants to do everything non-union.
Mhm.
And the deal fell apart because they anticipated that by the time she might be ready to direct our film, she might be involved in another film that would give her DGA credit. And
Mm.
therefore she would be in the DGA. Now, we would not be a signatory to the DGA, and that would have been an issue. And the lawyer representing her basically said, well, if she becomes DGA, you're going to need to sign, which would have done this and that. And so as a practical matter, I'm going to tell you that if you stay in the lane that you're at right now, with indies that are not necessarily going to get into the theatrical or streaming world, that ascent to where you need to go is going to be more challenging,
Mhm.
rather than even developing your own projects, getting them into film festivals, and getting yourself recognized where someone will say, we will do this.
Okay.
I will tell you a story. I represented a lady in New York. I'm admitted into New York, DC, and in Georgia, as well as in Virginia. And I represented a lady in New York, and she did shorts. She directed shorts all the time. And we were working on, trying to get her to a feature. And one of the problems of directing shorts all the time is that the feature people think that short film directors don't know how to do features. Okay, it's a very, I don't know that that's a true statement or not. And she had won awards with shorts and everything, but we could never get a feature deal off the ground for her.
Okay.
Until, and the big word is until, at her wedding, she knew two famous actors. And as their wedding present to her, they said, we will be part of a feature film for you. So we were able to go out into the market and say, here's her record. Oh, by the way, here are these two actors.
Yes.
And everyone got interested. And even then we had to negotiate, but that's how she got her step into the DGA and into the feature market. So it's really one, getting noticed. Now, your second part of your question is, what kind of things are you going to ask for in the agreement?
Right.
Obviously, depending on the nature of the film, you have to negotiate your pay. Is it going to be a flat fee? The best guide is scale.
Okay.
For the DGA. That is at least a good starting point for that. As well as I do, how many cuts, and what will the director's cut look like compared to the final cut? That's obviously huge from your creative standpoint.
Yeah.
I've certainly been in situations where director clients of mine have freaked out based on the fact that their final cut was butchered by a producer because of one competing reason or another. So your pay, if there is a back end, in other words, if there is any type of back end that will come, then that's very important. Obviously, tickets to the premiere, your directing credit, the place and size of the credit, where that goes. You want some role in being able to, depending on the size of the project, to select your crew. If you're going to have an assistant director or any of that sort.
Okay.
Obviously, the shoot schedule, and you're going to want breathing room for the shoot, and how that will work. And again, you're not going to be union likely. So you may find yourself on a union production for the actors, but you may not be union. And so
because you have so many days
you
that
will
you have
be
to put
adjusting.
in.
Just because a production company signs with one guild doesn't mean they're going to sign with everybody else. And so you need to, but that would be to your benefit, because if you got the benefit of the schedule and all the things that SAG-AFTRA provides for their members in a thing, that would likely be a production that you would get noticed from. But those, I would say, the major things. You also have to be careful of delay, because if there is a delay that goes too long, then you miss out on other opportunities. And so one of the classic provisions is called a pay or play provision.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but at some point, if you're attached to a project, after a certain date, it's pay or play, which means that they either have to go forward with you, regardless if the project is made, which means you would still be compensated. So a pay or play provision is common for someone like in your situation.
So what I'm hearing is, get into the DGA, have famous actor friends, and then if you want, what I'm hearing, and I'm hoping I'm right, is this is like a second question. I have more questions. So how can I set up a meeting with you, Kirk?
I think there'll be a way to contact me, but depending on how well we do with questions tonight, you may be able to jump right back in the queue.
All right. Well, thank you. This was really helpful.
Remember, talent finds its way. And so if you're not in mediums where people can recognize your talent as a director, it's that much harder. If you're just directing commercial films in some strip mall in Virginia Beach, it's not as easy to be found. I love Virginia Beach, incidentally. But if you're doing that, then essentially,
Don't worry, I live in New York. I live in New York.
But you're not
It's okay.
in film festivals, so you're not, competing for those types of prizes, then
Yeah,
you're limiting your ability to be discovered.
this is really good advice. Thank you.
So, thank you.
Anybody in the room?
Hello again.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi, great.
What's going on? How many years have you been to this?
I would say since 2017.
2017.
Get to see everyone again.
Thank
and
you.
it's great to meet a whole bunch of new people.
I didn't get a chance to say hi earlier. Yes.
Hello, for everyone I'm just meeting for the first time. My name is Claudia Bolaños. I'm a content creator in the DC area, and I've been with WIF, DC, and VPA for several years. As we were talking about the difference between streaming and theaters,
Mhm.
it brought to mind that I've been working on a short, which I can't decide at the end whether I should distribute it either to theaters or to streaming. Can you talk about some of the differences in how to pitch to either one for distribution services?
Well, think about it. How many theaters are there that would show a short these days? And where would they attach it? I mean, just as a practical matter, given what has gone on in theater today, shorts are probably not the thing. Now, the one benefit is if you can get a short to display in a theater, and meet the qualifications for an Oscar. Now, I'm very serious. You must think in these terms. Then, the benefit of the short is to bring attention to your skills as a filmmaker. So, if I was looking at theaters right now, I would be looking at it with a strategy to try to get some sort of prize recognition, whether I would go to a film festival or try to get into some sort of Oscar or other similar type of race. And that I know that sounds far-fetched, but it's not far-fetched at all. And have clients that, are very proactive in how they do that. So if we push that aside, then really streaming is the way to go. And you have to think about who out there would feel that there's an audience for that. You don't want a situation where a streamer just simply takes your content, signs you to a long agreement, and it just goes in limbo. So I would say that streaming's an obvious answer if you want to monetize, but depending on who the streamer is, I would do heavy, serious amount of due diligence so that you're not ended up just giving the contractual and legal rights away to your project for a long period of time where it's never going to see the light of day again. And that would be my concern in your situation.
It's like on streaming, there's like a less guarantee of your stuff getting seen.
But my point is that you can take a strategy of going to film festivals, going other prize-oriented types of contests to be seen, even though you may not monetize it. If I was advising you in the long run for your career, taking this project and being seen and recognized, and that opening doors to other possibilities, even if you make zero from it, is a far better move for you than maybe monetizing it in a streaming platform that may or may not bring you much money, given the nature of your project. Yeah, I mean, do you ever go and watch the Oscar shorts, all the ones that are nominated? That's a fun.
I've seen some of them, yeah.
Yeah, but I love going to the theater, and you spend 90 minutes watching all of the shorts that have been nominated for an Oscar, or
Oh no, I
the
haven't
short
done that
films,
yet.
or things like that. So I mean, you get a sense of, I would recommend you do that to get a sense of what gets nominated.
Okay.
I mean, just that alone would be helpful in you understanding your craft and what it takes to get recognized at that level.
Yeah, and what I'm doing actually is an animated short.
Animation, of course, yeah. Yeah, there is a lot. I mean, the other thing I'd say is there are folks out there that manage animators out in Los Angeles. Have you ever thought about trying to contact mainly out in LA, but there are companies that look for animators and manage them and provide them work and other things and take their fee. Have you ever thought about that?
I did think about that at one point.
Okay, I take it that didn't go well.
I mean, like just moving out has become, there's a lot more roadblocks now to moving out than when I started this project. So,
Got it.
I'm always looking for any companies that support animators in any way.
But like a manager, someone who would try to find you business and work and take a fee off of that, an agent, manager.
I haven't looked that far yet.
That I would look for. They're out there because there's a demand in animation. I mean, it's not like there's a abundant supply of animators. If animation is your field, there are agents, there are managers out there that look for good animators and can find them work and projects based on your goals and where you want to go.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope it was helpful.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Thank you for coming back out. See you next year.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully we will. All right. Are we back onto Zoom?
Hi,
Hi.
I'm a complete novice in.
What does that mean? We're all novices.
Thank you. I have started my adventure into being a hyphenate. I'm an actor,
Okay.
and I just took a screenwriting course, and I wrote a short, which was a lot of fun. But then we had readings, and I got really wonderful feedback, and it went to my head, and I want to go farther with it.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering if you could address, at what point do you copyright your material?
They're great.
Because with readings and people loving something and jumping in and start tussling over it, when do you do that?
So that's a great question. When do you start copywriting materials? First off, these days under copyright law, the minute you create something, you automatically have copyright protection, okay? Now, you don't have the same protection as a copyright registration, but I will explain that in just a moment. So what does that mean? If you can prove that you created it and it's your work, then you can still protect the copyright, the intellectual property associated with it. I want to talk to you then about the benefits of actually registering your copyright, and the fees have gone up. They won't let you bunch projects and things together these days, but copyright registration provides the registrant with many advantages. And the most important advantage is if there's a dispute of ownership over the material, the fact that you registered it with the Copyright Office gives you the presumption that you're the owner. So when you go into court, the other party has to prove that they're the owner and that you're not, because it's presumed that you're the owner by virtue of the registration. Now, obviously, if there's two registrations, the first registration is going to have that presumption, but that alone is very significant in enforcing rights. Registration, likewise, when you register work, it's primarily to protect the work. So what does that mean? In addition, you get damages, but you can also get punitive damages if you can prove that the work was infringed upon intentionally. You also, now this is something that, near and dear to my heart, is you can get lawyer fees, okay? Why? Because when the Congress was enacting the copyright statute, they realized that sometimes there'll be a starving artist or people can't afford a lawyer to go through, as Joe will tell you, to go through federal court to enforce rights, a very costly thing. But if you have a clear infringement, then there is an incentive. A lawyer goes, well, I think the odds are that we will be able to collect our fees from this. And I can guarantee you there are a lot of cases that have been taken on as a result of not only the nature of the infringement being obvious, but the ability that the work was registered. And while the client couldn't afford to pay the attorney was able to collect attorney fees. So registering is important. Now, I want to debunk, there is no such thing as a poor man's copyright. Has anyone heard of that phrase, the poor man's copyright? I don't think it happens every day, but I would say that at least maybe once every 2 months, 6 to 8 times a year, someone says to me, I have protected my work because I put it in a self-addressed envelope and sent it back to me, okay? That is not copyright protection, all right? So I just want to be clear with everyone. And if I need to delve into that, I will delve into that, but that is not copyright protection. Yes, it's inherently protected, but putting it in a self-addressed envelope and sending it back to you and does not add any further protective value, and in fact is a waste of time. So registration with the Copyright Office is what does that for you for the reasons I just explained. The second thing is sending your work to the Writers Guild also does not protect your work or does not give you any preference or anything like that. At the end of the, well, I don't even know what it does sending it to them, but at the end of the day, the Writers Guild, if there is a dispute on writing, they have a procedure, an arbitration procedure to determine who should get what credit. Because why? For the writer, the most important thing is getting credit. Because if you're not credited as a writer, then no one knows that you did that. And that's what the Writers Guild does. So there's no inherent protection by just sending your script off to that. So the bottom line is, as soon as you intend to publicly distribute your work,
Okay.
you will want a copyright registration, and you won't make the mistakes that we just talked about, and you'll see the benefits of why. And hopefully you won't have any infringers. If you want, at some point, I can answer a question on copyright infringement and what that involves. You look like you have a follow-up.
Yes, I just wanted to know, at what point are you not permitted to do rewrites and still be recognized as having a copyright?
Well, you can supplement your registration. And I'm not sure I understand. There's never a point where you're not permitted to do rewrites unless you're in a writer's agreement that somehow only gives you certain number of rewrites before the producer says, that's it. But that would be a contractual issue. As far as copyright protection, you can always supplement your registration.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
Are we going to stay with acting or writing? Oh, lost her. All right, why don't we take the question in the audience and then we'll come next. Hey.
What's up? How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so I guess a little bit about me. I do documentary films and I'm a director and a DP, and sometimes I produce, and I'm building a production company with my wife right now. So
she's the finances and the brains, the executive.
Yeah.
She's going like this.
Yeah.
She's going like this to me.
On every aspect, you know how it is.
Yeah.
So
what have you put in the can?
So I mean, when I worked on some Nat Geo projects.
Okay.
I was living out.
Good old Nat Geo projects.
Yeah.
Right?
Some and then I've been doing some what else have we been doing? Just a lot of commercial work, documentary stuff.
You always have to be careful with commercial work because you get stuck in that lane and people think you can't do, theatrical or other things because all you do is commercial. I had a client that was a tremendous commercial maker, but could never get a shot at a theatrical because he had such a success record in that area that people just didn't think he would get that. I think the same happens with those that are on film and those that are on live stage, right? The actors, they tend to separate themselves.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I read a book about filmmaking, like, I don't know, 4 years ago that my friend gave me as like a gift from college. And the first page was like, well, if you're going to get into filmmaking, you should also like get into other art work as well. Like you should play the guitar and like learn how to paint. And so then I just like dropped the book immediately.
I have never heard that advice before.
I never opened up the book in my life.
Okay, I mean, not that I'm against the guitar or
Yeah.
art, but I have never ever heard that advice before.
Yeah,
That
it's
is the
funny.
new.
So, I mean, it
Uh-huh.
honestly lead into I was selling oysters on the side. It's kind of a long story, but yeah, that's how far that went. The creative process of, just trying to be creative, right? So,
Mhm.
anyways, the questions I have, well, first of them, I guess, have you seen the documentary called Blackfish? It's about like SeaWorld and stuff.
No, that's like the orca,
Yeah,
orcas
so,
and
yeah, it's like
Shamu.
yeah, exactly. And
uh-huh.
they're like the documentary.
I represented Shamu once.
Oh, really?
So I just had, there may be a conflict. No, I'm
interest
just
here?
kidding.
Okay.
But I did represent Shamu once.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's cool.
SeaWorld. Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, SeaWorld, I read that like, so I guess a little bit, well, what I was asking about, and I know that the filmmakers, when they produced that, like they got a bunch of, like, insurance, errors and omission insurance and all that. And like, where, they knew that they were getting into, they're doing a documentary that's essentially attacking SeaWorld, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So what legal advice do you have for like a filmmaker, documentary filmmakers who are essentially making pieces that might be attacking subjects?
Well, so there is a thing called the First Amendment, first off, and we
Yeah.
still have that functioning,
Yeah.
at least as of today,
Yeah,
in
thank God, right?
our country. But there is a concept in the law called fair use, and there are different examples of, and that is to say that if you're infringing on someone's trademark or their copyright or things of that sort, that the way you're using it is fair use, and therefore you're exempt from, from those claims. And that is a highly litigated. Do you get in, Joe? Do you get into fair use work and stuff like that? So I may get you to jump in on this as well and add to anything that I say, because you actually have a litigator here who does that. And I eat popcorn while Joe, does his thing in the courtroom. But fair use, one element, one big area for documentary filmmakers for fair use is any type of social commentary that you are doing. So if your subject matter is you are, as a documentary filmmaker, making social commentary about something, okay, then there will be an analysis of that. I may ask Joe for further about that, but as a general proposition, that will be considered fair use, but you're commenting on your subject. So let me give an example. One of the famous US Supreme Court fair use cases is Roy Orbison's estate and Two Live Crew. And so Two Live Crew made a what they called a parody of Pretty Woman, but essentially they just re-recorded Pretty Woman. And Roy Orbison's estate never gave permission for this. And it went all the way up to the US Supreme Court on the defense that it was fair use by the basis that they were, it was parody. And the Supreme Court said, no, fair use, first and foremost, parody, you must be commenting and doing the parody on the very subject matter that you're doing. So there was no parody of the song, if you will. It was just a remake of the song, as opposed to like Weird Al Yankovic, who does make parody of the song, just to give a contrast example. In this instance here, you're making, you are hopefully making a social comment. There have been I know there have been a number of documentary films about SeaWorld because there's controversy about how animals are treated, things of that sort. So you're assuming that you're not violating trespass because fair use doesn't allow you to trespass on property. I've had to tell clients that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And fair use doesn't allow you to take other people's materials that you've taken from them without their permission,
Okay.
unless it might fall into the very subject matter of what you're talking about. I'm going to press Joe on this in just a second. And fair use doesn't let you just interview somebody without getting some permission from them, because if they're either commenting or not. So there's certain things you need to do still to get rights and things like that. But as a general proposition, if you are making social commentary, if you're saying that, for example, Michael Moore does a lot of documentary films, and he is quite critical. You have public officials that are considered fair use because if you're commenting on the war in Iraq, or you're accusing the public officials and things like that. That is obviously commentary in and of itself. Yep. But he also goes to GM and barges in the doors of GM and tries to go see Roger, right? And does these sorts of things because he's trying to make a commentary on GM and what they've done. So there's a balance there. Joe, what would you add on fair use as far as what you would determine as a documentary filmmaker to be the critical elements? And come on up here and just speak into the microphone for our Zoom audience and everyone else. Sure. Joe Meadows, cameo appearance, everybody. I knew it was going to happen tonight. Go ahead.
I like the boots.
All right, thank you.
I got you.
I know, but I'm showing mine.
But
you're not.
You and I have different hairstyles.
That's right. We do. You need to. Well, never mind. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, so there's a concern that you're putting something together that somebody else who's the subject of what you're putting together is not going to like.
Can you hear Lawrence, Joe, correctly with the mic? Or is he closer? Let's a little closer, okay. Joe.
So you're worried that what you're putting together is going to upset somebody else, right?
Yeah, and I want to have the protection. That's why we get you guys involved.
So there's the what Kirk was talking about, fair use. If you're worried about potentially infringing on their intellectual property, their copyrights or trademark or something else, the content of what you're saying may disturb them. You might be worried about that. Now we're in the world of what I live in, half of my practice, the defamation world, libel world, First Amendment kind of protection world. And I'm sometimes on both sides, representing plaintiffs and representing defendants. So I kind of have a little bit of a balance of interest and perspective here. Certainly, you mentioned something about insurance, or somebody did. There are.
I think I heard.
I can speak to E&O, but that's it. But just to talk about the legal elements of what he needs to be aware of. But unless you deal with E&O?
Well, no. Well, yes, sometimes we do, but there are products out there that would help. That could help you out there and protect in case of some sort of liability. Now you have to make sure you review the policies and make sure there are not exclusions in there that you have to worry about. But putting aside insurance protection, you should probably have somebody take a look at what you've put together and do like a libel or some sort of defamation sort of review. And that's probably going to be a lawyer. And as long as what you're saying, though, is substantially true, because as Kirk said, I mean, First Amendment is live and well. As long as what you're saying is substantially true or protected opinion, you have limited your risk as much as you kind of can. You can't stop somebody from filing a lawsuit or sending a claim, but you certainly can reduce your risk in terms of liability. And doing due diligence as well in your homework to back up what you're saying or what you're producing out there is also very helpful, because somebody who's going to say that you've hurt them through your statements, they have to prove you did so with some sort of fault, either negligence, you were negligent in putting together this product, or you were doing it out of some sort of some malice or actual malice kind of reason to say what you're saying, but do due diligence, say what is substantially true and wrap it up in protected First Amendment opinion. And those are kind of the best things you can do.
Joe Meadows, everybody. He came out here just to support me, but I knew I'd eventually get him up on the stage. Let me say a couple other quick things as well. And Joe would agree with this. Truth is a defense. Okay. I represent Beth Macy, and we were involved in the dope sick deal. And it's not uncommon for Beth to get letters from people associated with the opioid industry. And, kind of like, hey, we might be doing something like this. We don't like this. But at the end of the day, her research is so impeccable. And as a defense, it's really more of a harassment, type of thing than anything else. So the level of your homework, if you don't fly by the seat of your pants and you are well documented and you know what you're saying along that line, truth is the ultimate defense. And sometimes, and I imagine Joe does deal with this, you may have a client who feels defamed, right? But you have to tell them that the minute you file suit, they get to ask you about these things that you don't want to maybe answer questions about, right? In a deposition. So you got to really, then that goes in your favor. Finally, on E&O insurance, the best thing to do is to apply to E&O insurance because they'll have a list of questions. And did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do that? Because if you didn't do this, you didn't do that, or something came up with this, there's going to be an exclusion to your policy on that. And that's going to be something that you're going to want to then address. Well, yes, it depends what a distributor may require.
After you're done, depending on.
Yeah, but it may, and there's a statute of limitations issue involved in how long you may want to do that. And a lot will just depend with your distributor. But don't be scared to be a documentary filmmaker. It's what I tell clients, go out, make your film. Yeah. Once you have it in the can, there are plenty of people like Joe or others, myself, that can look at it and say, you need to alter this, we need to address this, whatever. One final thing, and this is because this was on my mind yesterday, have a client, a documentary filmmaker, has a deal going on with a major network, and they're going into a prison system, and they're gonna have to interview prisoners, things like that. So they showed me the pitch deck, and they showed me the letter that goes to the prison, the prisoners, okay? And I was really concerned that they got them on the phone. They always think, the lawyer's, doing this. But really, the pitch deck to what was being sold to the network and what the network really wants out of this is a little different, a little concerning, not concerning, but is different in that if you showed the prison or the prisoner the pitch deck, they might not agree to all this. So I had to tell them, I think we've got a problem here because what you're really selling and what you're kind of representing yourself, to be might not, align correctly. And so I spent this morning looking at what they're going to send out and making my suggested alterations to what would be presented, which I thought would be more accurate to what will be the final outcome, because I did not want someone providing consent and feel like they've been misled in such a way, especially if it had further consequences for them and having that type of lawsuit. So how you present yourself and how people let you in the door and what their understanding is also an important aspect of this.
Okay. I had another one.
Okay, talking to that mic, Lars is about to faint here.
This might just be a question for some people that are young filmmakers as well. Generally, what would you recommend for a production company, general legal advice for a production company?
Hire a good lawyer. I don't know.
So contracts, right? You would say.
Absolutely.
Right?
First and foremost, I'm always stunned at people who come to me that sign contracts that are awful contracts that have, really just disrupted the intention of their project or what they're trying to do. I think it was just even this week, today's Thursday, so Monday, I had a new matter, and the person presented me with a contract that she'd signed for a project that's her project, but it was so poorly written, and the party on the other side has claimed that they now control the project. Okay. And so it's just a mess. I'm just going to tell you it's a mess. And then now I had lunch with yet another client on Tuesday, and she is a very savvy and sophisticated producer and things of that sort. And she has a deal in New York, and she signed a contract and didn't have me or anyone else look at it. And it now is coming back to bite her because it was all trust, this, that, and she just didn't. And so now I've got to figure out how to navigate out of that. So I not only just a contract, but, you know, an internet contract is always suspect. Okay, I'm just going to be frank. And I'm quite familiar with what's out there, and I've seen agreements that look like they came off the internet. Why? Because, yeah, there are forms out there, but someone needs to sit down, ask some questions like, what are you doing? What are the objectives? This, that, and then try to alter that form to reflect and use experience to say, oh, you know, this is missing this is missing that. We ought to address this issue. And that's hopefully the added value, not hopefully, what I know is the added value that a lawyer or someone competent knows what to do. So proper contract. I had one deal in the last month where I don't even know how to say this. My client supposedly got the rights to a project, and it's a nice 7-page contract, but there was literally no language in there that said, you hereby have the rights. I mean, I was like, okay, I know this is, you say it's the rights, but I'm missing, where does it actually convey the rights to you? And the client looked at it, everybody looked at it, this, that. And so you had a mess. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is a thing to having contracts, and the idea of having contracts is that you can stay out of court, and that you generally have a comfort level that if there is a dispute, that there's a level of confidence that if you had to go to court or arbitration, that you would have a likely outcome in your favor.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And how much is like something of this? What would it cost for your services? And like typically,
I'm
like,
offering a freebie. No, just kidding.
like if I'm doing a budget for a film, right? So let's just say whatever. Not a commercial, but
Everything is on a case-by-case basis. And I know that's a typical lawyer answer, but here's what I always do. I always meet with someone for the first time for free. I don't charge them because I'm trying to figure out if I can help them or not.
Yeah.
And if I can't help them, I'll try to point them in the right direction. And if I can help them, what I say to them is, here's my estimate, here's my flat fee, or here's whatever the fee structure, and here's what you're going to get for that. And you decide when you want to hire me. So even when you're talking to me, until that point, when we say, okay, it's time to hire me, and you get an engagement letter that does that. And what I find is that just in the consultation time with me, the client is at least 50% better off or more than when before they came in the door to see me, or before they got on Zoom to talk with me, because I was at least able to tell them, this is what you're looking at, here are the issues, blah, blah, blah. If you're going to try to do this, is whatever. I wouldn't recommend trademarking that right now because it's not going to be worth your time, whatever it is, and then go from there. And then I'll always tell a client, talk to other lawyers before you decide, because it's as Joe knows, it's a relationship, right? And if you're not comfortable with who's giving you the legal advice and what they're doing, then that's not a good thing. And fortunately, I'm blessed, plenty busy, and don't have to chase ambulances or, go after that. And it doesn't benefit me if the relationship is not have it. I had one client hired me this is maybe within the last few years, hired me. And then she went out to LA on something and she met a lawyer out there and they just hit it off. And this lawyer, I know her, and she's a very good entertainment lawyer out in LA. And I didn't feel like I got poached or anything like that. But eventually she said, you know, I'd really like to work with. I said, God bless you. Go for it. Go for it. And I hope you guys do well, because that's how important that relationship is. But they just hit it off in a way that I think would be, beneficial to both. And I still know that lawyer, deal with that lawyer from time to time, ask how that person's doing and go from there. So, but I think to at least be able to sit down with someone and get an initial framework of what you need and what that looks like. We always do that for free just because it has to make sense for everybody.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, now we're on camera. There we are.
Hi.
Hi.
Rick, thank you so much for doing this. I am Tamara Johnson.
Hey, Tamara.
Yes.
And what's the name of that bird in the cage?
That's my little red bird.
Okay.
Birds are supposed to be a good sign for good luck for those
Okay,
of
well,
us
good.
in the
Is that a
entertainment
cardinal?
industry.
Is
Beg
that a
pardon?
cardinal?
Yes, it is a cardinal. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Nice. I love it. I love good feng shui.
Yes. My husband and I have recently formed a production company, and our first project is getting the option right now for a play by a deceased playwright. So we are working with his heirs. And so we spoke with an attorney up in New York City, and he almost seemed, he was very familiar with the stage and getting productions done on Broadway and off Broadway, but we're not really quite there. This is our first project. And so we're just trying to get this thing unearthed.
So can I just stop you? So the end goal is a live stage performance?
Yes.
Okay. So has the play been staged before?
No.
Okay. So it's a first time stage.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Please keep going.
Okay. So when we spoke with him, we kind of felt like maybe we were too small for him. But he wasn't sure if he was licensed to be able to represent us, being that we are living in Virginia and he was in New York City. So part of my question is, what do you as an attorney have to do to get licensed to represent people in other states? And we're at the point right now, we've got our option. It's gone back a couple of times, and we are ready now to seek our attorney to get our backsides covered.
Got it. Okay. Well, I am also admitted in New York and in DC and Virginia and Georgia, and I don't know that you should be advising a lawyer as to what they need to do to, either by reciprocity or otherwise to get admitted there. Being familiar with live stage, a lot of those agreements are covered in New York law just by the nature of where they are. So if you have an attorney that is familiar with New York law, then I don't know that would be a basis of a bar complaint or not. And I find that a very odd kind of issue to raise, but maybe I might be wrong with that. I imagine that in negotiating this, you've got an option in that you're going to have, as you know, in theater, there's a vesting period, right? For when you might actually own the rights outright, because are you bringing music to it? Is it a musical? Is there, it's all right there. Okay. Is the goal to present it regionally here in Virginia and then try to work your way up to off-Broadway, off-Broadway or somewhere like that?
The goal, the option that we have agreed upon is 2.5 years with the heirs. And we are hoping, at that time, we have the option for 2 workshop productions and a full production as many times as we can get it. So it could be start in Virginia. It could play in other states as well. We just, at this point, would be limited to having an off-Broadway production. Is that right?
You would
Off-Broadway?
be
Yeah.
limited to off-Broadway? You couldn't go Broadway?
We could not, under this contract, do an off-Broadway production.
Okay.
We could
And
do,
that's
we could
usually-
do the show in New York City.
Which would be off Broadway or anything in that regard. I just represented something similar within the last 6 months. And in fact, we ended up walking away from the negotiation, and here's why. And here's why that they're actually doing that with you. From your perspective, if you put the time and energy, because live stage is not easy. I mean, that there is a hard cost to that. And in order to then turn a profit, let's say that you're able to develop it in a theater house and then move it up to, say, here in DC or somewhere like that. At some point, if you're successful, you want a formula with the rights holder to say, hey, this is ours now, and we can go to Broadway and we can go to places, because the risk that you run is that you are successful on a regional basis. And then a producer who is a Broadway producer comes down, sees this, and you're at the end of the 2.5-year mark, and you've got a major producer up in Broadway, and they're going to basically come around you and take the play from you because you no longer will have those rights, and you may not recoup your expenses at that point, you know, in your business plan. So one of the key things in negotiating that type of deal that I get involved in, and usually the provision is at some point there's a vesting period. And in this last deal that we did that fell through, the agent for the rights holder, which in your case was the estate, insisted that the rights would vest with my client if there was a 21-day run on Broadway. And so I said to my client, do you think you could get that far with this? And client said, well, maybe, maybe not. I think I could get to the Warner Theater in DC. I think I could get, and so I was trying to negotiate to say, look, if we get this far, I'm not going to let you undercut us and take this away from us after we've put all this year, time, and effort into that. You have to give us another rope line to keep going, you know, further with this. And of course, the agent says, oh, I would never do that. We're all friends, we're all family, la la. And while I hope to be a good-hearted person, that's not my job to just, you know, take that for what is said. So we got stuck in what I knew was the agent's desire to essentially say, hey, you guys go develop this. If it succeeds, keep it going. Then I want it to stop right here, because then me as agent can go to a bigger fish and let them take it from there. And my concern and saying to the client is, we could go this far, you could lose all of this despite your success if you don't have the ability to continue to climb the ladder on some reasonable milestone. And I think that's the most important thing that in the deal that you just described that you need to be aware of. I don't want to ever second guess what another lawyer has already said, especially since this is just a simple question and I don't know all the facts, but it might be that your lawyer in New York, who's very probably experienced with these productions and things like that, is saying, hey, for someone in your profile in Virginia with your husband putting this together, this is the best deal I'm going to get you. This is the most realistic deal, you know, 2.5 years, this, that, you know, whatever. But I would really ask, what happens if in 2 years you want to keep going because you know you've got success and you might be able to bring in other investors or other people that would collaborate to help get it to the next level. do you have to start over again, or do you have some lifeline to extend it based on either some objective criteria? That would be the thing I would be most concerned with, than whether or not, you know, your lawyer can represent you in Virginia on what I'm guessing is a New York contract. Does that
Okay.
answer your question?
Yes, it sure does.
Any other follow-up with that on the theater side or live stage, or what you're negotiating? Where are you going to exhibit it first? You're just going to, where would
Well,
you?
We're talking with a theater in DC. We've had other theaters that we've been talking to for the first showing.
Mhm.
And we're trying to get that theater a cut that after the heirs have received, I guess their windfall, I guess is what they call it.
Mhm.
That after a certain amount of money, then a percentage would go back to that originating theater.
Yeah, which is the comment. Yeah. Equity. Are you going to do it equity? Is it Equity House or?
It will be equity, yes.
Okay. So that you got quite a budget then to stage it and everything.
Yep.
So with just to speaking to that, I would really just have to ask generally, if after 2.5 years you want to keep going, and because you show signs of success and promise, do you have that automatic right to do that, or do you at least have some milestone that's achievable to allow you to continue to do that, rather than the agent for the estate or whoever's negotiating the estate going, oh, good, they got it to DC. Now we're going to take it to New York. And the warning sign that you gave me was when they said to you, you can't do it in New York, essentially. You know, you can't do it on Broadway. You can't do it off Broadway, you know, because that tells me, they're thinking they'll let you be the developer and go from there. So one other negotiation point that you might make if it becomes sticky on that is you say, look, you can take it away from us to a Broadway producer, or and some of my dear friends are in-house counsel at some of these major you know, Broadway producers, a very small, tight community. We might say, look, they're going to have to buy us out. If we come this far and you're going to take it away from us, then there's going to have to be some compensation or some recognition of what we've done in order to allow you to then go walk away from us despite what we've done. So just another, hope that answers your question.
Great. This is just exactly what I wanted to find out about.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, come on up.
A quick question. If you've done some fairly extensive supplementation.
What's your name? Come on.
Lou Morano.
Hi, Lou.
Hi. If you've done some fairly extensive supplementation to your own copyrighted material, do you have to re-register or does it carry over?
There's a form where you can update it. It's not a difficult thing. And if there's complication, just re-register it for the $35. I had one situation long ago. Unfortunately, we have someone in our firm that does that. My time is spent on other things, but there was some confusion about it, and there was some issue with the Copyright Office. And I said, okay, a lot of time and effort trying to straighten this out, or why don't we just register it again, and it's a derivative from the original copyright, and we still own it. We don't have any reason to think that anyone has taken it, you know, from us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. Are we on Zoom or yes? I know this person, I think. Is this Ty?
Yes, it is, sir. How
Hey,
you
Ty,
doing?
how you doing?
I'm doing well, doing well. Thanks for being here, Kirk. Thanks for providing us with all the
You
information.
could have just taken me to Bodo's, you know that.
Yeah, I could have, and I you know, hey,
Or
if you
Shenandoah Joe's.
You come to Charlottesville, I got you. Don't worry about it.
Or actually the Juice Laundry. If you took me to the Juice Laundry, you get all the free advice.
I love juice. I love Juice Laundry.
I love Juice Laundry too.
I love it. I love it. But thank you so much for being here, though. You know, you have a wealth of information. You know, as you may know, you know, I'm a promoter. I started my company as a promoter almost 30 years ago when I was an undergrad, and I promoted, you know, up to like almost 1,400 events at this time. And I've become a filmmaker. I still own my company, I just had a comedy show at the Paramount Theater. But in my filmmaking world, which I've been stepping into for the past maybe 4 or 5 years, I just finished my narrative film called Amanda, and I had 2 sold out screenings at the Vinegar
And I
Hill
was trying to
Theater.
remember, is that a feature or is that a short?
It's a funny thing. It's
Well, I've never heard that before. It's a funny thing.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I have
Between a feature and a short?
I have 2 versions. I have a 45-minute version and I
Okay.
have a 26-minute version.
All right.
And
So you have a TV version, 1 hour TV version if needed.
Yeah,
Got
yeah.
it. Okay.
As you know, most film festivals do not like those long shorts, like even the 26-minute version.
It's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. So I'm still submitting the 26-minute version, but what I'm doing with the 45-minute version is I'm creating the tour for that myself. So I'm renting out theaters, like I did Vinegar Hill Theater and had 2 sold out screenings 2 weeks ago. I have
So you're
Norfolk.
four-walling it.
Yeah. I have Norfolk coming up February 6th. I have Richmond February 5th. I'm booking DC now. I'm doing New York and LA. So I feel as though, me being a promoter, I feel it's important for me to try to like take this into my own hands, especially as a 45-minute piece. So, I don't know what distributors would do with it. So my goal is just put it in front of a bunch of eyes and have it seen so people could really, I want to use it as a calling card, but I'm making money at the same time because that's just what I do for a living as a promoter. And I think it's a good situation to be in, to have those 2 worlds as a promoter, because most filmmakers are not promoters. They don't know marketing. They don't know how to put their film out. My thing is this though, and I listened to you, so you answered a few questions of mine already, because I was like, wondering some of the same things that other people were wondering. So when it comes down to, I wrote this movie, I wrote, directed, and produced it. So my question to you is, I don't know if there's something else better that I could do with this particular project other than screen it myself, promote it myself. Because when I screen the 45-minute version, I'm screening it, but it's followed by a 45-minute panel discussion with me and a couple of the actors. So it really becomes an event where someone will be willing to pay $20 for. Instead of just having a short and nothing else to follow, no panel discussion, no, they can't meet the filmmakers. This is how I'm screening it around the country, but it can get costly. It can get costly unless I get sponsorship to offset some of the expenses. So my question for you really, for one, do you think that this is one of the best ways of doing it? Because I'm submitting the 25-minute version, I'm submitting that to festivals, but I'm taking the 45-minute version myself and screening it, around the country.
Well, I mean, I mean, first off, you are correct. The fact that you're a promoter makes a huge difference in four-walling it and selling it. I mean, there are a number of thoughts. Let me first say that what you're doing right now, I would say your model is best. Your best indicator of your model is the faith-based community, because there are so many people who produce in the faith-based community. And what do? They don't go to the theaters. They go to the churches and they find their audiences, and they make the deals with the, from what I've observed of you, this is the first time you and I've talked about it, is, you know what your niche audience is, how to get the sponsor that would, make it profitable for you, and then how to appeal to the niche community to get an attendance. And my guess is you will be for the time and effort, you can be making far more money doing what you're doing right now than if a distributor picked it up and went from there. You could obviously sell it to a major corporation based on what I know of what you've done, and then they might use it as a marquee in their advertising and or in their PBS, sponsorship or other, things of that sort. So actually selling it in a buyout, with what I know of what you've done, I would maybe suggest a major corporation that would want to associate with you and the symbolism in your product, because that's maybe another avenue. The film festivals will get you recognition, but you got to decide what is it that you want to be recognized for. You got a 26-minute, you might get someone that might pick it up for 30 minutes on some platform. I don't think there's a lot of money to that, but I think you want to go to festivals and try to win awards to have under your belt that then becomes the credibility to go elsewhere. But I have some clients that have done this model where they are just creating their own live audiences because they know how to produce a niche, and they know how to then take it to this city, find the right sponsors that will want to be associated with the project, four-wall it by renting out the Bird. I'm guessing you have the Bird in Richmond.
No, I'm gonna do Movie Land.
Movie Land, of course, on the Boulevard. Yeah.
Yeah, the Bird,
And
the Bird
that
is
makes
pretty big.
total sense. Makes
Yeah, the
total
Bird is
sense.
pretty big, so.
Yeah, and make your profit that way. The downside is it's man hours on your part, to get there. Have you thought about pressing DVDs?
Not yet. I wanted to work the screening events for a while, and then look at probably DVDs or even like.
I think you ought to do that sooner rather than later.
Really?
Well, here's why. How many? I know you were in Charlottesville, and I know you've been in other places, and you could have sold DVDs. Press them for 49 cents or whatever it is, and sell them.
Yeah.
For you sell them as an act of a donation.
Okay.
So I think that if you're four-walling, especially with what you're doing, Ty, I would have T-shirts, I'd have a baseball cap, and I'd have DVDs.
Well, I'll be at.
I want a Monster and a Coco Verde at Juice Laundry.
Yeah. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
Because I'm sure other people will want, if they haven't asked this before I came on.
But you understand how profitable you're leaving money on the table with that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm getting merch done for sure. But the DVD, I didn't think about the DVD though.
Oh my gosh. Someone had a good experience and will say, I love this DVD. I might want to watch it again.
Wow. Okay. I'm surprised I didn't think about that. Thank you, Kirk. I really appreciate that. This other question is important for me because I'm currently writing a feature film. And I could tell you about that another time, but I wanted to find out, do you represent any production companies that have direct associations with Netflix? Distributors, a production company?
Yes, but yes. I mean, eventually, if you're writing a feature length, you've just got to find a producer or somebody. I wouldn't say, are you representing someone that's associated with Netflix? I'd say, do you know a good producer who has a track record, who's not going to, pardon my French, and what's the French word, screw you over in taking the script from you, but will actually produce the script that will allow you to get the credit. And they're out there, but the easiest way to do is start winning screenplay awards.
Okay.
And I mean, the Virginia Film Festival is one, but and they've got a nice prize. But there are many good national screenwriting festivals where people are looking for material, and not just people who could actually produce it in a major way. And so that would be the route I'd go if that's where you're headed.
Yeah, Kirk, my personality wouldn't allow someone like that to screw me over, because I would never give up my work. I'm not a control freak, but I put my own money behind my stuff.
Well,
so I'd rather
I'm going to be frank. When you have a major producer and the leverage and the different things, I mean, obviously someone like me would fight hard. But you get to a bottom line where it's a take it or leave it after you have gotten so far, and you're in that difficult position of taking that risk. That is the reality of the world, at least that I operate in.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I get it. And I really appreciate it, man. I just hopefully I would like for you to see this Amanda piece.
I'd love to see it
at some given time. But thank you so much, Kirk.
Yeah, you know how to reach me. So
yeah,
that'd be awesome.
All right, thank you.
But anyway, thank you. Juice laundry. How are we doing? We have time for any more questions? I think at least another 10 minutes. Okay. Well, I don't know if there's anyone else in our Zoom audience or not. Maybe not. Okay, if not, come on up.
Hey, Kurt.
Hey.
So my name is Andrew. I'm from George Mason University, actually right down the road.
All right, I'm familiar with where it is.
So in the last few years, we've had a lot of students doing some really amazing work.
Okay.
And
are you a teacher there, professor?
So I'm staff.
Okay, staff.
I work as administrative staff, and I'm going to be teaching a class in the fall.
Okay, what are you going to be teaching?
Cinematography.
Oh, of course. Okay.
So
I spoke with VCU cinematography class on Monday night.
Oh, wow. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And so I'm a little out of my realm, but there's a practical piece of advice that I kind of run into on a regular basis.
Okay.
So I have a lot of students. I have some students that are producing some really, really stellar work.
Okay.
And they're having opportunities to go to the regional Emmys, and they're taking their films out on the circuit.
Mm-hmm.
And the question usually comes up about creating LLCs.
Uh-huh.
And so obviously you're talking about students that have already produced work. Can you talk a little bit about producing?
Do you all have a policy that lets them keep their work?
Yeah, we don't.
So you don't.
Yeah, we as a program want the students to retain the rights to their work.
Not all schools do. That's why
not exactly.
I've had to navigate that.
Yeah, so we don't take any rights from the students for their work.
I'm with you.
But the thing that I really want them to understand is whether or not they want to encapsulate the film that they produced as an LLC, or whether they want to have an LLC themselves that owns the right to owns the film.
Okay.
But it's a finished film. So that's the kind of weird kind of situation.
All right. So I'm going to call this the LLC question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So first and foremost, if you have a corporation or an LLC, an S corp, there's a tax component, to it. So I'm not going to get into the tax component. Suffice just to say that if you have, if you're a sole member of an LLC, you're treated just for tax purposes like a Schedule C. So there's no real issue there. If you're an S corporation, then you have to pay yourself a salary, and then any profits will be treated as dividends, which arguably are taxed differently. I say arguably because that may change in some of the stuff that's going on in Congress right now. And then if you have more than one person in an LLC, you're not treated as a Schedule C. You get a K1, and you essentially treat it as a partnership, and you have to have an operating agreement. So I just want to give the ground rules there. Usually, if you want the Cadillac version of production, you usually have one LLC that's owned by the filmmaker or producer. And then you have another LLC, and it could be a corporation for tax purposes. I'm using those interchangeably here. Another LLC that is the production vehicle. And that production vehicle will be the shield, if you will, for the helicopter crashing on set and injuring people, the John Landis incident, or other things that happen on set, or things that will prevent a problem. The other benefit of the production vehicle LLC is that it can also be the holding spot for where the investors are. But that then depends on whether your LLC that owns it will want to take the rights back, or whether it will just keep the rights in that production and let it just continue to operate there. The Cadillac model is the filmmaker or the manager of the production LLC is your LLC as the manager of that. And then the production LLC either holds the investors or is simply there as a just a vehicle to protect against liability. Now, back in the 90s, when I was in kindergarten, okay, and still just learning about this,
We all were just in
I was a
kindergarten.
protege in kindergarten in entertainment law in the 1990s. But in the 90s, it was very common for the studios, in order to get around labor agreements, to create these, not dummy, but these LLCs, companies out there that they would fund through different means. And because that LLC was not a signatory in the major sense of the studio, and it was all done top secret, that LLC would negotiate better union deals to make the film more cost effective. And then the LLC would sell the film to Universal or to Warner Brothers or Sony or whoever was doing it at the time, even though they were behind the scenes. Eventually the unions, caught on to that. But, that was one other tactic that was used in the LLC. But if you're just, if not just, but if you're a documentary filmmaker, you're a small crew, you don't have a lot of investors, you're just kind of doing that sort of thing, I think just a simple LLC. But if you're getting into multi-layers of investors, or if you have a project that is controversial or has pyrotechnics or things of that sort, then I would use the Cadillac model. I would never, ever suggest to any of your students that they not have some corporate veil in order to protect themselves when out in the marketplace, doing this.
Yeah.
So does that answer your question as far as?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any, yes, come back.
Hi, Nathan. This kind of goes off the last Zoom colors question.
Uh-huh.
In the event your finished thing is too long for most film festivals, say 30 minutes, would you recommend just chopping it up and distributing it as like a series?
Well, okay, so a series is going to be for television, right?
Television or streaming.
Okay, and a film festival is just going to be a one-time event, right?
Yeah.
So
unless I submit to multiple film festivals.
Okay, but they usually have formats. They'll tell you that they're not going to let you have a 3-hour film at a festival, right? So I would just simply say that you may have to have a cut that conforms with the festival's requirements for entry. And I don't think that's difficult to do, depending, because most of them are in the same ballpark. At least the last time I became aware of that. When you talk about a series, would you go to a festival and say, here's part 1 and here's part 2? I don't think that that's a practical matter. How long is your project?
No more than 30 minutes. It's halfway done.
So why would you even consider cutting it at all? I mean, as far as there are qualifications for a short, would you be trying to qualify a 30-minute as a short?
Yeah, that was the initial idea, because I started production before COVID, and while I was working on the script, I was thinking more about what would be, at the time I thought more about just making the story good than about the time limit.
I would just make a good product, and if worse comes to worse, I would edit it to conform if you think you're going to be over any time frame. And if in 30 minutes you have to edit 15 minutes of it, which I can't imagine. I can't even imagine that you'd have to edit 30 minutes for a festival, to be frank, but I may be wrong. But my guess is, with what you've just described, you're probably fine.
Okay.
Unless you know of a festival with someone that says you can't submit anything beyond 20 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know that, but remember when you mentioned the example of the Oscars, I remember how the Oscar shorts are typically, they're 5 to 10 minutes. And
yes, they
are. I know
are.
what I'm working on would be too long for that.
So if you're going to then enter, same principle applies. If you're going to enter into if you want Oscar contention, then edit it to Oscar contention and find out how to get it into a theater, which most of them, for wallet, like Ty, was doing on his thing in a major city in order to qualify it. And then they formally enter it into the Oscar race. I don't know if any of y'all are members of the Academy. Okay, but the Academy, each member gets a box and there are all these DVDs by their category. And if you're entered and you make the initial round, your short is going to be in the box among all the Academy members, and they have parties and they watch different things and then they vote. And then based on the vote, you get nominated and then you go from there. So I have clients that say, we're going to try for an Oscar. And I'll go, okay. And they'll know what to do in order to submit it to meet the qualification. And then from there, they're hoping that when the Academy members look at it, enough of them will say, this is enough votes to get it nominated. Then the nominated box comes and they look at that, and you hope you're showing up at the Oscar. And I don't think the shorts get to the main Kodak Theater. I think they have a separate event and they just announce it on the screen, but that's still good enough, I think. But that's what I do if that's what you want to go for. Otherwise, go to a festival, make it 30 minutes or whatever it is, and get your recognition there.
All right.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks.
We're there? Is there any last question, or do we have a time for we're not on Zoom anymore, I don't think, but how about, I know you've got a last question, so come on up.
Probably ask you all day at this point. So I guess I don't know which one to ask first, but so I have a client. They were telling me that I could pull some clips off of YouTube and use it as like if it's like a news like BBC or CNN, and you could use that for. Well, yeah. Is that true or not?
No. There are many news organizations that will sue you for using their clip for commercial purpose. Okay. So if you're doing a documentary and you are referencing a news event that was a public event, a trial or something like that, and you're using it in a manner that just really speaks to making the point rather than essentially taking from it, then that's one thing. And that might arguably be fair use because that's a case-by-case basis. But if you're just wholesale taking news clips for commercial purpose, that's maybe not documentary or telling a story or things like that, then
it would be for like documentary for this one.
Then it's all on how you use it. Okay.
So that's a little gray area.
That
then, I guess, right?
It's only gray to the extent in how you're using it, right? And someone needs to look at it and say, yeah, this could fall into fair use or not. Remember also, YouTube has its own terms and services, right?
Yeah.
So you're not just taking from BBC or whoever it might be. When you take it off YouTube, you've already got terms and conditions there. You've been to the Creative Commons site, haven't you?
Yeah. There was, I was just working with a client in the past like year or
That's
two,
why I tell all the.
And we were doing something COVID related, and they're like, "Oh, just pull it off YouTube."
Of course,
and
just pull it off YouTube.
As long as it's like Al Jazeera or
of
BBC.
course, as long as it's not like they're going to come after
They were
you.
just saying, they're like citing that. I was like, "All right,
I'm being facetious, please."
Yeah, I was just like, I've never heard that before. It's kind of new ground to me because I've reached out on other documentaries prior, like music stuff, and I've had to actually get that stuff
well,
licensed.
obviously music it doesn't. I mean, look,
that's more like a question.
Client did a documentary on the history of films, okay, and the social commentary about the history of films. They took clips of old films. Bela Lugosi, this, that, but they didn't like take away from the film. They used the clip that made the point of what they're trying to say. And that generally is fair use, and you have not taken away. In law school, there's a famous case that I like to teach because when I grew up, when I was a kindergarten, of course, at this time, I would love to watch Evel Knievel, try to jump wherever Evel Knievel was jumping. Well, anyway, one of the classic law school cases is the case of the news showing the guy shooting out of the cannonball and landing successfully at the circus. So the news story was, hey, the circus is in town and blah, blah, blah. And here's, Joe shooting across and landing and blah, blah. Well, Joe sued the news and won, right? Because at that point, it wasn't quite fair use because Joe said, you've taken away my whole act. You've literally, from start to finish, you showed everybody what I did. Why would they show up to see this again in person, right?
Wow.
So even within the news context, which is inherently fair use, you can still violate someone's rights. And that's what a classic case that you can't on the news show Joe shooting out of the cannon and landing successfully because you've taken away Joe's whole business. And it wasn't necessary to tell the news that the circus is in town, okay? Now, I always ask law students if Joe fell out of the cannonball and there was an accident and da da da, that's news, right?
Yeah.
But not Joe successfully making it and landing it and taking away his livelihood.
Yeah.
So with that said, I think we are wrapping up. Is that correct? I want to just thank everyone both on Zoom and here in the audience. First, although the audience for coming out today, I want to thank Joe, my friend, for coming out and giving me support. And for those on Zoom, I love Thundershot Studios. I'll come back here anytime to do this. This is just one of my favorite events. So I just want to thank everyone here at Thundershot. I will say to you, having good quality studio space in Virginia is one of the best investments for the production community in the state as a whole. And that's why I always want to support Thundershot and similar studios around the state, because that's what makes a difference. And of course, least but not least, I want to thank the Virginia Production Alliance, organization near and dear to my heart. And there were some people here like Cahill and others that could not make it up, but I know we're watching by